Sorry about that. I think that we still have a lot of implementation to do for some of the diversity and inclusion legislation we've done that is reflective in state government. We also have created a lot of new offices in our state government, and the creation of those new offices and new positions has come through my subcommittee a lot of the time. And so I think that there's already been a discussion and trying to sort of put our arms around better creating these new offices and new positions and really their efficacy and value versus being able to, have some type of symbol or pat on the back for trying to achieve some goal or try to resolve some issue. But is it really by creating a new office or position that we do that, or is it by trying to achieve it through some alternative way? Now, I am one who has passed legislation to add an additional office to create a position in Virginia. It's the Office of Children's Ombudsman that reports directly to the governor. After we had continued issues of our local departments of social services not investigating certain claims against children and not really having an oversight mechanism in Virginia, right? So an unmet need where you have to have oversight. But we've done a lot of, I think, really good creations of offices. We did one on trying to merge together education and the workforce, creating that as an office to try and help streamline all of the stakeholders that have something to say about workforce development and education to make sure that we are, at least having a conversation about how we're going to prep our children for the careers of the future. We also created a position of a military spouse liaison to try and assist spouses of military families to be able to enter into a new community if they are stationed in Virginia and are moving elsewhere, and then to also assist them if they are going to be leaving Virginia to be stationed somewhere else. So these are all really good things that we've done. I think, though, that what we don't want to do is set a huge precedent that every single bill that wants to seek the creation of one of these offices is inherently, just going to be added to state government and the executive branch. I think that there just needs to be a distinction for those bills that sometimes are intentionally not given a hearing by, and this has happened over the decades in Virginia that aren't scheduled for a hearing because they are particularly thorny. There may not be an actual plan for implementation, especially if these are going to have large fiscal impact. And so, those, I think, don't get a hearing for those particular reasons. But then you also have really frivolous, unnecessary, sometimes only for political stunts, a category of bills that try and achieve that. And I don't know whether, I guess because everybody is duly elected to serve their constituents, that's whom they choose. So they have every right to be able to introduce legislation to do whatever they want to do. But is it going to help contribute to, I think, a robust discourse? I think is part of the consideration. So for me, it just underscores the fact that I had no idea how much in Virginia. It's not like DC, and we do hear the vast majority of all bills, do get a hearing, which is not the case in DC. So that's at least some benefit. But that, just like baseball and football, there is a rule book, and just like baseball and football, sometimes it's a contact sport in the General Assembly. And so trying to figure out how to play that sport, it requires you to have different abilities, different tools in the toolbox, different options available to you as you're trying to run plays, as you're trying to, get into the end zone. And so I think that there's definitely opportunity to talk about, making changes to how we do business, to maybe take away some strategic advantage that some groups of people may be able to get, but that overall not having hearings on bills hurts the transparency of the process that we do. So we have our own committee on rules just to talk about some of these things and talk about particularly thorny issues. But just like making a change to a major sport, you have to go through a huge process and generally get to some sort of compromise. And if we really wanted to go down that road on this particular issue, I think that, clever people, creative people could come up ways where maybe we could improve the system in some type of, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Todd, for the question. You know, again, in general laws, we really have to debate and consider some fundamental questions and values for how government is going to operate with its citizens. And what had currently been law and precedent in Virginia is that criminal incident information. So when a criminal incident actually occurs, that there would be some basic who, what, when, where that could be released to the press or to individuals so that people know in real time, at least that something has happened with maybe a sentence or two of information and not much more than that. Then you have criminal investigative files that can go all the way from origination through prosecution, sentencing, and the appeals process, and then ultimately become closed. And the question is what do you do with those closed case files that are no longer active? And in Virginia, the code said that they sometimes can be released to the public for examination and review, but only under the discretion of law enforcement. And so if that law enforcement agency decides that they don't want you to have it for really any reason, they don't have to give you that closed criminal investigative file. And we thought that it was important for us to advocate for legislation that would change that paradigm in Virginia, because I believe that the public has a right to see these completed case files, that ultimately the casework that is done by these investigators is done on behalf of victims and their families seeking to get justice, but it's also on behalf of the state and the people that represent the state, meaning that we should have a right to be able to see what they're doing and how they're doing it, and if they're being effective, and if they're doing the kinds of things that we as society believe that law enforcement should be doing. And also too, as Virginia has ended the death penalty, which happened this year, the question is do we have, one of the main motivators to get rid of that is the fact that there are people who are wrongfully convicted who are currently incarcerated. And sometimes they even are given death sentences too. And in Virginia, how are we able to figure out and understand who may have had one of those wrongful convictions? Well, a huge avenue for people to seek justice in that route is through reviewing the case files and seeing if there are discrepancies. And then also too, in an age where so much interaction is captured on body camera video, and anytime there's an officer involved shooting, it becomes a matter of community concern, that we want to make sure that once those investigations are closed and completed, that again, the public has a right to review that. Now, at the federal level, we are adopting largely now in Virginia what is already done for federal criminal investigative files by groups like the FBI. And what they have is a certain number of tests to say, well, it still could be exempted from disclosure, not have to be given to the public if it meets a certain number of different variables, that it might disclose the identity of someone who's confidential, that it might unwarrantedly invade somebody's privacy, that it might jeopardize a potential investigation. These are all the things that we put into the legislation, I think, as proper guardrails. But we were able to change the value statement in our code as it relates to criminal investigative files by saying that once they are closed, no, the deference should be, the presumption should be that the public should get it, rather than it being up to the whim and the decision of the people who hold those records, the people who actually did the investigations themselves.
Great, yeah, and thank you, Chris. Now, if I could just add, if I recall, this is a great case study of you had introduced this previously, didn't make it through, and we had the process in there, and you worked with the stakeholders to be able to modify it, and then ended up getting it through the General Assembly, right?
Yeah, I think it's important to resist the process when appropriate, but then to also embrace the process when appropriate. And this one really actually was a huge benefit because we introduced something. I used to be a reporter before I got into elected office. And so I have a lot of experience in this exact thing. And to be clear, this was not done for the press. It was done for the public, but that the press has a huge nexus in seeking these criminal investigative files a lot of the times. And so I felt pretty confident that what we had was good policy when it was introduced in the special session we had in the fall. And it got out of the House and made its way over to the Senate. But we have a process, and the chair of the FOIA Council is also on the General Laws Committee in the Senate, and asked that it be sent to her FOIA Council for review before the Senate could give a sign off to it. And you think at the time, oh man, this is just impeding progress. But actually going through 2 many hours long meetings of the FOIA Council in the fall gave us a better product. We were able to wordsmith it. We were able to debate certain conditions in the bill, we were able to try and edit it so that it's cleaner in the code too. So there are lots of things that process can afford us to actually create good code. I think in Virginia in particular, I see a lot of folks, especially the attorneys who help us physically write the bills. We want to make sure that we're good writers too, that we write good code, that it's only an idea. Only the bill, though, is what turns into law. And so the words matter. And so the process can oftentimes be very effective in getting us better legislation.